The blizzard arrived on the same day Victoria Foster did, and Caleb Young watched from his cabin window as both threatened to bury his world in white. He had been alone on this mountain ridge outside Abiquiu for 3 winters now, ever since Martha died bringing their stillborn son into the world. The cabin had become a tomb of sorts, cold even when the fire blazed, silent even when the wind howled. Caleb preferred it that way. The cattle ranching kept him busy during the warmer months, and the isolation kept him from having to explain to well-meaning folks in town why he no longer smiled or made plans beyond the next sunrise. The knock came just as the snow began falling in earnest, fat flakes that meant business. Caleb opened the door expecting perhaps a lost traveler or an injured animal seeking shelter, but instead found a woman barely standing upright, her traveling cloak crusted with ice, her lips blue with cold. "Please," she managed through chattering teeth. "My wagon went off the road about 2 miles back. My horse broke free. I have been walking for hours." Caleb did not hesitate despite his desire for solitude. He pulled her inside, guided her to the chair closest to the fireplace, and began stoking the flames higher. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with dark hair plastered to her face and eyes the color of amber whiskey. Those eyes watched him with a mixture of gratitude and wariness as he brought her a blanket and started heating water for tea. "You are lucky you found this place," Caleb said, his voice rusty from disuse. "Another hour out there and you would have frozen solid." "I saw the smoke from your chimney," she said, her voice gaining strength as warmth returned to her body. "I thought I was hallucinating at first." "What is anyone doing living this far from town in winter?" "Could ask you the same about traveling alone in November," Caleb replied, pouring hot water over the tea leaves his late wife had dried 3 summers ago. They were probably stale, but they would serve. The woman accepted the tin cup with shaking hands. "I am Victoria Foster. I was heading to Santa Fe to meet my brother. He found work at a trading post there and sent for me after our parents died last spring. I thought I could make it before the worst weather hit." "You thought wrong," Caleb said, not unkindly. He moved to the window and looked out at the swirling white void beyond. "This is going to be a bad one. 3 days at least before it clears enough to travel." Victoria's eyes widened. 3 days, but I cannot impose on you for 3 days. Surely there is some way I can continue to town tonight. Town is 8 miles down a mountain road that will be impassable within the hour," Caleb said flatly. "You are welcome to try if you want, but I will not be burying you come spring." The bluntness of his words seemed to convince her. She slumped back in the chair, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "I am sorry to burden you, Mr. Young, Caleb Young." He gestured around the cabin. "It is not much, but it is warm and dry. You can have the bed. I will sleep by the fire." "I could not possibly take your bed," Victoria protested, but her eyes were already drooping. "You can and you will," Caleb said. "You are half frozen and exhausted. I have slept in worse places." He showed her to the small bedroom in the back of the cabin, giving her a nightshirt that had belonged to his wife and pointedly not watching as she closed the door. Within minutes, he heard the creak of the bed ropes as she lay down. Within minutes after that, silence. Caleb returned to the main room and stared into the fire. He should have felt resentful at this intrusion into his carefully maintained solitude, but instead he felt something he had not experienced in years. A stirring of something almost like purpose. Someone needed him. Someone other than the cattle and the land. The blizzard raged all night. Caleb dozed fitfully by the fire, waking periodically to add wood and check that the storm had not torn anything loose. Each time he woke, he found himself glancing toward the bedroom door, reassuring himself that his unexpected guest was still there, still safe. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the wind had increased, rattling the shutters and forcing snow through every tiny crack in the cabin's walls. Caleb rose, stretched his stiff muscles, and began preparing breakfast. He had bacon, eggs from his 3 hens, and flour for biscuits. It was more elaborate than his usual morning meal of coffee and whatever was easiest, but something made him want to cook properly. Victoria emerged from the bedroom as the smell of frying bacon filled the cabin. She wore the nightshirt still, which fell nearly to her ankles, and she had braided her dark hair back from her face. In the morning light, Caleb could see that she was lovely in an unconventional way, with strong features and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Good morning," she said softly. "Thank you again for taking me in. I truly would have died out there." "Probably," Caleb agreed, flipping the bacon. "Coffee, please." She moved to the table, noticing it was set for 2. "You did not have to go to all this trouble." "No trouble. I have to eat anyway." He brought her coffee, black and strong, then returned to the stove. "How do you take your eggs?" "However you are making them is fine," Victoria said. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, savoring its warmth. "I am not particular." They ate in relative silence, the kind of quiet that exists between 2 people who are not yet comfortable enough for conversation, but not uncomfortable enough to force it. Caleb found himself studying her when he thought she was not looking, noting the calluses on her hands that spoke of hard work, the way she ate with appreciation but not desperation, the independence in her bearing despite her vulnerable situation. "What did you do before you left to join your brother?" Caleb asked finally, clearing away the plates. "I was a school teacher in Kansas," Victoria said, "in a little town outside Topeka. After my parents died, there was nothing keeping me there, and James wrote saying there were opportunities in New Mexico territory. I thought teaching might be needed in Santa Fe." "It probably is," Caleb said. "Territory is filling up with families. Everyone wants their children educated now." "What about you?" Victoria asked. "How did you come to be living alone on a mountain?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "I am a rancher. This is my land. I run cattle on the lower slopes and in the valley below." "Alone," Victoria pressed gently. "That seems like difficult work for one man. I manage." The tone of his voice made it clear the subject was closed. Victoria did not push further. Instead, she rose and began helping him clean the breakfast dishes, despite his protests. They worked side by side at the wash basin, and Caleb found himself acutely aware of her presence, the way she moved efficiently through the small space, the soft sound of her humming as she dried the plates. The day passed slowly. The storm continued its assault on the cabin, but inside they were warm and dry. Victoria proved to be easy company despite Caleb's initial reservations. She did not chatter needlessly, but when she spoke, her words had substance. She told him about her students in Kansas, about teaching children to read when their parents could barely write their own names. She spoke of her brother James, who was 2 years older and had always been restless, always looking west toward new horizons. Caleb found himself talking more than he had in months. He told her about the land, about the cattle, about the harsh beauty of New Mexico winters. He did not tell her about Martha or the baby, but Victoria seemed to sense the shadow that hung over him and did not pry. As afternoon faded into evening, Victoria noticed that the cabin was becoming cluttered with snow that had blown in through various gaps. Without asking, she found rags and began stuffing them into the cracks around the windows and door. Caleb watched her work with something approaching wonder. Martha had done the same thing their first winter together, moving through the cabin with the same practical determination. "You do not have to do that," he said. "I know," Victoria replied, "but it needs doing, and I dislike being idle." That evening, Caleb made a simple stew from salt pork, potatoes, and dried beans. They ate at the table while the wind shrieked outside, and somehow the howling made the cabin feel even more like a sanctuary, a small pocket of warmth and light in an ocean of cold darkness. "Tell me about your ranch," Victoria said as they lingered over coffee after the meal. "How long have you been here?" "5 years," Caleb said. "Came out from Texas after the war, wanted land of my own, wanted to build something that would last." His voice grew quieter. "Thought I would have a family to pass it on to." "You still could," Victoria said gently. Caleb shook his head. "That dream died a while back." Victoria did not respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "My father used to say that dreams do not die unless we bury them ourselves. Sometimes they just wait for the right season to grow again." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was. I miss him every day." Victoria's eyes grew distant. "He believed in second chances. He always said that life was too short to give up on happiness, just because it hurt to hope." Caleb felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the ice that had formed around his heart. He looked at this woman who had stumbled into his life on a blizzard wind. And for the first time in 3 years, he wondered if maybe his father-in-law had been right about second chances. The second day of the storm began much like the first, with breakfast and coffee and the comfortable routine they had somehow already established. But as the morning progressed, Caleb noticed Victoria looking around the cabin with increasing dismay. "What is wrong?" he asked finally. "Nothing is wrong exactly," Victoria said carefully. "It is just that this cabin is very much a bachelor's dwelling. When was the last time anyone properly cleaned it?" Caleb bristled slightly. "I keep it clean enough." "You keep it functional," Victoria corrected. "But look at the dust on those shelves, and the soot around the fireplace, and the corners that have not been swept in months." "I have been busy with the ranch," Caleb said defensively. "I am sure you have," Victoria said. "But since I am here and the storm is keeping us inside anyway, would you mind if I did some proper housekeeping? It would give me something useful to do, and honestly, the disorder is making me anxious." Caleb wanted to refuse on principle, but he looked around and saw the cabin through her eyes. She was right. It was functional but grimy, the home of a man who had stopped caring about anything beyond basic survival. "Do what you want," he said gruffly. "I need to check on the livestock anyway." He bundled up and fought his way through the storm to the small barn where his horse and milk cow waited out the weather. The animals were fine, but Caleb took his time anyway, reluctant to return to the cabin and face whatever changes Victoria might make. He told himself he was being ridiculous. It was just cleaning. But somehow it felt like more than that, like allowing her to change his space meant allowing her to affect his carefully maintained emotional distance. When he finally returned, stamping snow from his boots and shaking it from his coat, he stopped in the doorway and stared. The cabin had been transformed. The floors were swept clean, the windows scrubbed until they gleamed, the furniture polished with what must have been melted lard. Fresh wood was stacked neatly by the fireplace, and the dishes were arranged on the shelves with military precision. Even the bed in the corner where he had been sleeping was made properly, the blankets tucked in with hospital corners. Victoria stood in the center of it all, her face flushed from exertion, her sleeves rolled up to reveal slender forearms. She looked at him almost defiantly, as if expecting criticism. "It looks good," Caleb said simply. The tension went out of Victoria's shoulders. "I found some sage in your pantry and used it to scrub the floors. I hope that was all right." "It was fine." Caleb moved farther into the cabin, seeing it as if for the first time. "You did not have to do all this." "I wanted to," Victoria said. "You saved my life, Mr. Young. This is a small repayment." "Caleb," he said. "You can call me Caleb." "All right, Caleb." She smiled, and it transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "And you must call me Victoria or just Vicky if you prefer." "Victoria suits you better," Caleb said. "It is a strong name. My mother chose it. She said I came into the world fighting and needed a warrior's name." Victoria's smile turned sad. "She died when I was 12. Consumption." "I am sorry," Caleb said, and meant it. They stood looking at each other across the cleaned cabin, and Caleb felt the distance between them somehow growing smaller, even though neither moved. There was an understanding forming, a recognition of shared loss and loneliness that needed no words. The afternoon found them sitting by the fire, Victoria mending a tear in Caleb's spare shirt while he worked on repairing a broken harness strap. The storm continued outside, but inside there was peace, the kind of companionable silence that usually took years to develop between people. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said eventually, her needle pausing in its work. "You can ask," Caleb said. "Cannot promise I will answer." "Fair enough." Victoria took a breath. "Why do you live alone up here? It is clear this cabin was built for a family. There is a cradle in the corner of that back room, empty but well made, and some of the clothes you have given me belong to a woman who cared about pretty things." "So what happened to make you choose this isolation?" Caleb's hand stilled on the leather strap. He was silent so long that Victoria began to apologize, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Her name was Martha," he said quietly. "We married young, homesteaded this land together. She was strong and brave and wanted a house full of children." His voice caught. "3 years ago she got her wish. She was pregnant. We were so happy, Victoria. We had names picked out, clothes made, everything ready." Victoria had stopped sewing, her attention completely focused on him. "The baby came early," Caleb continued. "A blizzard like this one. Could not get to town for the doctor. I tried to help her, did everything I knew how, but it was not enough. The baby was breech, and Martha was not strong enough. They both died in that back room in the bed where you have been sleeping." "Oh, Caleb," Victoria whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I buried them in the spring when the ground thawed," Caleb said, "under a cottonwood tree down by the creek. And I told myself I would never love anyone again, never risk that kind of pain. So I stayed up here alone, working the ranch, existing but not really living." Victoria set down her sewing and moved to kneel beside his chair. She took his hands in hers, and Caleb was startled by the warmth of her touch, the comfort it offered. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "And I am so very sorry for your loss. But Caleb, surely Martha would not want you to stop living. Would she not want you to find happiness again?" "I do not know if I deserve it," Caleb admitted. "We all deserve happiness," Victoria said firmly. "We all deserve second chances." They stayed like that for a long moment, hands clasped, the fire crackling beside them. Caleb looked down at this woman who had blown into his life like the storm itself, unexpected and wild and somehow necessary. And he felt something he had thought was dead, forever beginning to stir back to life. That evening, Victoria made dinner using the supplies in Caleb's pantry, somehow creating something far better than the sum of its basic parts. They ate and talked, sharing stories of their childhoods, their dreams, the people they had loved and lost. Victoria spoke of students she had taught, children who had learned to read against all odds. Caleb told her about driving cattle, about the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, about watching thunderstorms roll across the valley below. "You ever get lonely up here?" Victoria asked as they finished the meal. "Every day," Caleb admitted, "but I thought that was what I wanted, what I deserved. And now," Caleb met her eyes across the table, "now I am not so sure. The third day dawned clear and bright, the storm finally exhausted. Caleb woke to find Victoria already up, standing at the window and looking out at the transformed landscape. Everything was buried under 3 feet of pristine snow, glittering in the sunrise like scattered diamonds. "It is beautiful," she said as Caleb joined her at the window. "Deadly but beautiful." "Like most things out here," Caleb said. He was acutely aware of how close they were standing, their shoulders nearly touching. "The road should be passable by this afternoon. I can take you down to town." Victoria turned to look at him, and he saw something in her face he had not seen before. Uncertainty. Reluctance. "What if I did not want to go?" she asked softly. Caleb's heart stuttered. "What? What if I wanted to stay?" Victoria clarified. "At least for a while longer. I could help you with the ranch, with the cabin. I am a hard worker, Caleb. And honestly, I am not sure I am ready to leave." "Why?" Caleb asked. Needing to hear her say it, Victoria reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his bearded cheek. "Because in 3 days, this cold cabin has felt warmer than any place I have lived in years. Because you have reminded me that broken people can still connect with each other. Because I think we might be able to heal together in a way we never could alone." Caleb covered her hand with his own, turning his face to press a kiss to her palm. "If you stay, it cannot be as a guest or a hired hand. I could not bear to have you here as anything less than a partner, an equal." "What are you saying?" Victoria whispered, though he could see in her eyes that she understood. "I am saying I am a fool who swore he would never risk his heart again," Caleb said. "But then you appeared in that storm, and in 3 days you have made me feel alive for the first time in years. I am saying I want you to stay, not as a guest but as my wife. I know it is too fast, too sudden, but Victoria, I cannot let you walk out that door and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, I will stay. I will marry you." Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "Are you sure? You barely know me." "I know enough," Victoria said. "I know you are good and kind and strong. I know you have loved deeply and lost terribly and still found the courage to try again. I know that when I look at you, I see the future I thought I had lost. That is enough for now. We will learn the rest as we go." He kissed her then, and it was like coming home after a long exile. Her lips were soft and warm, and she melted into him with a sigh that spoke of yearning finally fulfilled. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together. "We should go to town today anyway," Caleb said. "Find the priest, do this properly before anyone can gossip." Victoria laughed. "I suppose rushing to marry before the scandal starts is very practical." "I am a practical man," Caleb said, grinning. It felt strange to smile, like using muscles that had atrophied. "Besides, I want this settled before you come to your senses and change your mind." "I will not change my mind," Victoria promised. They rode down the mountain that afternoon, Victoria seated behind Caleb on his sturdy roan gelding, her arms wrapped around his waist. The journey took 3 hours through the snow, but neither complained. In Abiquiu, they found Father Miguel and explained their situation. The priest was skeptical at first, insisting on speaking with Victoria alone to ensure she was acting of her own free will and not under duress. But whatever he saw in her face convinced him, and he agreed to marry them that very evening. They were wed as the sun set, painting the snow-covered plaza in shades of gold and rose. The only witnesses were Father Miguel and a handful of townspeople who had heard about the impromptu wedding and come out of curiosity. Victoria wore a borrowed dress that was slightly too large, and Caleb wore his only suit, carefully preserved in a trunk for 3 years. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, promising to love and honor each other through whatever trials life might bring. When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed Victoria with a tenderness that made the watching women sigh. This was no casual arrangement, no marriage of convenience. This was two wounded souls choosing to face the future together, and everyone present could feel the power of that choice. They stayed in town that night, at the boarding house, properly married and free to share a room without shame. In the privacy of their small, rented space, they came together with a mixture of passion and gentleness, learning each other's bodies, discovering new ways to give and receive pleasure. Victoria was not a virgin, and she did not pretend otherwise. Her husband back in Kansas had died of influenza early in their marriage, leaving her a widow at 20. Caleb appreciated her honesty, her lack of false modesty. They were both adults who had loved and lost, and now were choosing to love again. Afterward, lying tangled in the sheets, Victoria traced patterns on Caleb's chest. "Are you sure you want to do this? It is not too late to change your mind. I could still go to Santa Fe." "You want to go to Santa Fe?" Caleb asked. "No, I want to stay with you." "Then stay," Caleb said simply. "We will send word to your brother. Let him know you are safe and married. He can come visit when the weather clears if he wants." "He will want to meet you," Victoria said. "He is very protective." "Good. A woman should have people who care about her welfare." Caleb kissed her forehead. "I promise I will always care for you, Victoria, always keep you safe." "And I promise to fill that cabin with warmth and life again," Victoria said, "to help you remember how to be happy." They returned to the mountain cabin the next morning, stopping in town to purchase supplies. Victoria bought fabric for new curtains and clothes, seeds for a spring garden, and a dozen other small items that would transform the cabin from a bachelor's shelter into a proper home. Caleb watched her shop with barely contained enthusiasm and felt his own excitement building. For the first time in years, he was looking forward to the future. The winter passed in a blur of domesticity and deepening connection. Victoria threw herself into making the cabin comfortable, sewing curtains for the windows, braiding rag rugs for the floors, organizing the pantry with the efficiency of a military general. She also insisted on learning every aspect of ranch work, refusing to be sheltered or protected beyond reason. By January's end, she could milk the cow, muck out the barn, split firewood, and even help Caleb check on the cattle in the lower pastures. They worked side by side during the day and fell into each other's arms at night, their passion tempered with growing affection and understanding. They learned each other's moods and preferences, discovered shared interests and amusing differences. Victoria loved to read and insisted on ordering books from Santa Fe, filling the previously bare shelves with volumes of poetry and history and adventure. Caleb proved to be surprisingly musical, pulling out a battered guitar he had not touched in years and playing folk songs while Victoria sang in a clear, true soprano. James Foster arrived in late February, riding up to the cabin with the suspicious glare of a protective older brother. He was tall and lean, with Victoria's same dark hair and intelligent eyes. Caleb liked him immediately, appreciating his blunt questions and obvious concern for his sister's welfare. "She seems happy," James admitted after spending 2 days observing them together. "I came here ready to take her away if she showed any sign of regret, but I can see she made the right choice." "I am the lucky one," Caleb said. "Your sister saved my life as surely as I saved hers, just in a different way." James nodded slowly. "She wrote that you lost a wife and child." "I am sorry for that loss. Thank you. But I think Martha would approve of Victoria. They are alike in many ways, both strong women who know their own minds." "That they are," James agreed. Take care of her, Caleb. She has already buried one husband. She could not survive burying another. I plan to stick around for a very long time, Caleb promised. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and new grass. The cattle that had huddled in the valleys through winter emerged sleek and healthy, ready to be driven to higher pastures. Victoria insisted on helping with the spring work, riding beside Caleb as they moved the herd, her face bright with exertion and joy. "I never knew I could love this life," she said one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "Growing up, I thought I wanted cities and culture, but this, Caleb, this feels like where I was always meant to be." "You were meant to be with me," Caleb said, pulling her close. "Everything else is just geography." Victoria laughed and kissed him. Such a poet. Who would have guessed the gruff mountain rancher had such a way with words? "I have hidden depths," Caleb said, grinning. "That you do, husband, that you do." In May, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She told Caleb one morning over breakfast, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach, her eyes searching his face for his reaction. Caleb felt fear lance through him, memories of Martha's screams and the terrible helplessness he had felt as she died. But he also saw Victoria's hope and excitement, and he refused to let his past trauma poison their future. "Are you happy?" he asked carefully. "Very happy," Victoria said, "but also terrified. I know what happened with Martha. I know you must be scared." "I am," Caleb admitted. "But we will do things differently this time. We will go to Santa Fe when your time gets close, stay with James and be near a proper doctor. I will not take any chances with you, Victoria. You are too precious to me." Victoria's eyes filled with grateful tears. "Thank you for understanding." "We are in this together," Caleb said. "All of it, the joy and the fear and everything in between." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Victoria remained healthy and strong, working alongside Caleb until he insisted she rest more. They made plans, preparing the cabin for a child, building a new cradle since Caleb could not bear to use the one he had made for his lost son. This cradle was different, larger and sturdier, crafted with hope rather than painful memory. In October, as the aspens turned gold on the mountain slopes, they made the journey to Santa Fe. James welcomed them into his small home near the trading post where he worked, fussing over his sister like a mother hen. The doctor examined Victoria and pronounced her fit and healthy, predicting an easy delivery. "First babies can be unpredictable," the doctor warned, "but she is young and strong. I see no reason for complications." Caleb wanted to believe him, but the fear remained, a cold knot in his stomach that would not ease. Victoria sensed his worry and held his hand constantly, reminding him through touch that she was there, she was alive, she was not Martha. The baby came in early November, during a cold snap that reminded Caleb too vividly of the blizzard 3 years ago. But this time, everything was different. The doctor was there, calm and competent. Victoria labored hard but without the terrible complications that had killed Martha. And when their son finally emerged into the world, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, Caleb felt something break open inside him. All the fear and grief of the past finally releasing its grip. "He is beautiful," Victoria said, exhausted but radiant as the doctor placed the baby in her arms. "Look at him, Caleb. Look at our son." Caleb looked and felt tears streaming down his face for the first time since Martha's death. "He is perfect. You are perfect. God, Victoria, I love you so much." "I love you too," Victoria said. "So very much. Now come meet your son properly." They named him Daniel James Young after Victoria's father and brother. He was a healthy baby with his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes, and from the moment Caleb held him, He was utterly devoted. All the love he had locked away, all the paternal instinct he had thought died with his first child, came flooding back in an overwhelming wave. They stayed in Santa Fe through the winter, not wanting to risk the mountain roads with a newborn. James doted on his nephew, and Caleb found himself building a friendship with his brother-in-law, the two men bonding over their shared love for Victoria and the new baby. It was a good winter, full of laughter and discovery, as they learned to be parents together. Spring found them back on the mountain, the cabin more alive than it had ever been. Daniel proved to be a relatively easy baby, curious about everything, quick to smile. Victoria balanced motherhood with ranch work, refusing to be confined to the house, often carrying Daniel in a sling on her back as she went about her chores. He should know this land, she told Caleb. Know the smell of pine and sage, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. This is his heritage. Caleb agreed, and they spent long days outdoors as a family, introducing their son to every aspect of ranch life. Caleb taught Victoria more about cattle management, and she taught him patience, how to slow down and appreciate small moments. They grew together as partners, their love deepening from the passionate rush of those first days into something richer and more enduring. 2 years later, Victoria gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Claire Martha Young. The choice of middle name was Victoria's idea, a way of honoring the woman who had come before, of acknowledging that loving Caleb meant accepting all of his history, including his first wife and lost child. Martha would want to be remembered, Victoria said as she nursed their newborn daughter. And I want our children to know they had a brave woman in their family tree, someone who pioneered this land alongside their father. Caleb kissed her forehead, overwhelmed by her generosity of spirit. You are an incredible woman, Victoria Young. I am a woman who knows how lucky she is, Victoria replied. I found you in a blizzard, and you gave me everything I did not know I needed. A home, a purpose, a family, and a love that gets stronger every day. Life on the mountain settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following years. Daniel grew into a sturdy boy who loved the cattle and the land as much as his father did. Claire proved to be her mother's daughter, independent and intelligent, with a curiosity that kept both parents on their toes. They added 2 more children, another boy and another girl, filling the cabin with noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family life. Caleb expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land as it became available, building it into one of the most successful cattle operations in the territory. Victoria started a small school in Abiquiu, teaching the children of other ranchers and settlers several days a week, finally fulfilling her dream of spreading education on the frontier. They worked hard, laughed often, and loved deeply, building the kind of life neither had dared dream possible during those dark years before the blizzard brought them together. James remained a constant presence in their lives, never marrying himself, but becoming the favorite uncle who spoiled his nieces and nephews shamelessly. He eventually became a partner in the trading post and built a successful business, visiting the mountain ranch several times a year and hosting the family in Santa Fe during holidays. You ever regret it? Caleb asked Victoria one evening, 20 years after that fateful blizzard. They sat on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching the sunset, their children grown and scattered, pursuing their own dreams and lives. Daniel was running the ranch with his father, learning to manage the business side. Claire had married a lawyer in Santa Fe. The younger two were still finding their paths. Regret what? Victoria asked, her hair now threaded with silver, her face lined with years of laughter and sun. Agreeing to marry a stranger, giving up your plans to join your brother, building a life on this isolated mountain. Victoria turned to look at him, her amber eyes still bright and clear. Not for a single moment. You asked me once why I wanted to stay, and I told you this cabin felt warm. But it was never really about the cabin, Caleb. It was about you. You made me feel warm. You made me feel safe and cherished and alive. Every day since has only proven I made the right choice. Caleb pulled her close, marveling that after 2 decades, touching her could still make his heart race. I am the one who made the right choice. That day I opened the door and found you half frozen on my doorstep. I was barely alive myself. You did not just warm the cabin, Victoria. You warmed me. You brought me back to life. We saved each other, Victoria said simply, and we built something beautiful together. That is all anyone can hope for. They sat together as the stars emerged, content in the comfortable silence of 2 people who had loved long and well. The mountain wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of sage and promise. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to the rising moon. The cabin behind them glowed with lamplight, a beacon of warmth and welcome in the vast wilderness. And Caleb Young, who had once thought he would spend his life alone in the cold, held his wife close and thanked whatever providence had sent that blizzard so many years ago. Because Victoria Foster had blown into his life like a storm, unexpected and wild and transformative, and she had never left. She had stayed, making his cold cabin warm, filling his empty life with love and laughter and family. He had never wanted her to leave, and she never did. Through decades of hardship and triumph, joy and sorrow, growth and change, they remained together. Partners, lovers, best friends, and soulmates. The woman who had arrived half frozen on his doorstep had become his whole world, and every day he woke grateful for the gift of her presence. The wind picked up, carrying the promise of snow. Winter was coming again, as it always did in the mountains. But Caleb no longer feared the cold or the isolation, because no matter how fierce the storm, no matter how deep the snow, his cabin would always be warm. Victoria would always be there, her love a fire that never dimmed, a light that never failed. They rose together as the night deepened, walking hand in hand back into the cabin, into the warmth and light, into the life they had built together from the ashes of loss and the hope of second chances. And as Caleb closed the door against the night, he knew with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man alive. Because he had found love twice in one lifetime, and this time it would last forever.